All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started. So, good morning, everyone. Welcome to this ADA or Autism Training and Technical Assistance Project monthly webinar for June. We are excited to welcome back Kerry Magro. We've had him on our ADA series before, and so we're excited to welcome him back. And today he's going to be discussing managing anxiety in autistic children and adults and speaking from personal experience. So, we're excited to hear his story and some of his tools and tips and tricks that he has for all of you about how to manage anxiety in autistic children and adults, whether you yourself are an autistic child or an adult, or you are helping and assisting and supporting autistic individuals or individuals with autism. I'm going to use both of those terms interchangeably today. So a couple of things, housekeeping things before we get started, and I hand it off to Carrie. My name is Kirsten Bayer, and I'm with the Illinois Center for Specialized Professional Support at Illinois State University. I will be on for technical support and moderation today, and just to help Carrie and all of you. So if you have any questions or need anything regarding this webinar series today, you can email me here or call me at my office phone and reach me there. You can also private message me in the chat. I had the chat closed for everyone, so I apologize, but it's open now. So you can go ahead and type in the chat if you'd like to say good morning. And then a little bit about our project. So the ADA project, or the Autism Training and Technical Assistance Project, if you're not familiar with us, we develop and present professional development resources. We do a lot of research for the system, and we specifically focus on supporting individuals with autism or autistic individuals in their transitional piece when they transition from either secondary to post-secondary, or they transition from secondary to the workforce or employment. So we work with employers, we work with CBOs, community-based organizations, we work with families, we work with teachers and administrators. So we have a wide audience of stakeholders for our project. Our project is funded by ISB, or the Illinois State Board of Education. So we work in partnership with them. A little bit about our center. So we are ICSPS. We have been within the Department of Education, or the College of Ed at Illinois State University in Bloomington, Normal, Illinois, since 1977. And we work on a slew of projects, the ADA project being very near and dear to our heart. And we design and develop professional development, technical assistance, and program improvement strategies for the secondary, post-secondary, and workforce systems. So again, we're funded by Illinois State Board of Education. Here's our website where you can find today's webinar recording following today's session, as well as a whole slew of resources and other webinars and professional development. AutismCollegeandCareer.com is going to be a great resource for all of you. And then today's session is being recorded. And so the recording for today will be housed at that website. Let me go back a slide. And you can find the recording for today within about 48 working business hours. It takes us to get a little time to get it edited and up on our website. And then we do have closed captioning on today for accessibility reasons or note-taking purposes. Feel free to turn that on. And then we also have the presentation slides, Carrie's slides today, available for all of you. I will put those in the chat momentarily once I hand it off to him. So we're going to do a couple of beginning slides, or beginning polls, excuse me. I'm going to go ahead and launch those now. The first one is just, which region are you located in? So the ADA project reaches across the whole state of Illinois. So we want to make sure we're reaching the whole state. So this is for our autism plan, or our ADA planning committee that helps plan the professional development for the whole fiscal year for the system. We do look at these analytics to make sure we're hitting the whole state. So if you could go ahead and answer that poll for me, I'd appreciate it. And then if you actually just scroll down on the little pop-up, that's the poll. We have our second poll for you also. Which ADA stakeholder do you best represent? So again, we have multiple stakeholders for this project, and we want to make sure we're hitting all of them. And so we appreciate you answering these polls. And then once we're done with this, I'll hand it off to Carrie. We'll give it just a couple more seconds here. Lots of good mornings in the chat. So thank you so much, everyone. Good morning. For questions, Carrie's going to note this, but you can type them in the chat or the Q&A, and he'll talk a little bit more about questions. Okay, so it looks like most of you have answered the poll. I'm going to go ahead and end that and share the results. So it looks like we are hitting it across the state, which is great to hear. We have a huge audience today from Chicago, Illinois, and up north. Quite a few sprinkled across central and southern Illinois as well. And then we have quite a few of you are secondary educators today. We have a couple post-secondary educators, community members, four students or young adults, and then 6 family members on today, which is awesome. So thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it. We hope you find this session valuable. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my slides here and hand it off to Carrie, and he'll share his slides, and then I'll post his slides in the chat.
Yes. Well, Kirsten, thank you so much again for having us. We love working with your team and everything that you continue to do to support the autism community and champion these causes. For those who might be new to my journey, my name is Dr. Carrie Magra. I'm a professional speaker, author, and autism self-advocate. I've worked on projects in the autism entertainment space, such as Love on the Spectrum on Netflix, in addition to the film Ezra, which just came out on nationwide release on last Friday, I believe. So today we're going to talk about a really important topic that sometimes falls through the cracks in our community when we're talking about managing anxiety for children and adults who are on the autism spectrum. But before we get started, I wanted to hear from all of you. If you could just tell us in the chat box, first, where you're from. Secondly, when were you first introduced to the topic of autism? If it was when you were going for your degree, it might have been that. If you have a child, it might have been when you were going about receiving that diagnosis for the first time. And then finally, what has been your experience with autism and anxiety? Often in our community, some people who have autism also have a dual diagnosis, which can be related to some form of mental health diagnosis as well. So for the next few minutes, we'll just be doing that. And I will be giving you guys shout outs as I'm monitoring the chat.
Awesome. Thank you, Carrie. One more thing I forgot to note. I apologize. We had someone ask in the Q&A here, so I'm just going to denote it for everyone. So we are on the Zoom webinar platform. We're not on Zoom meeting. So you do not have, as an attendee, you do not have your microphone. So if you don't see your microphone, that's normal. You don't have a microphone on this system. And then you also don't have capability to turn on your camera. It's a little bit more of a presentation formatted platform through Zoom instead of a meeting platform. So everyone's used to Zoom meeting and we are on Zoom webinar. So it is a little bit different. You can have your microphone if you want to ask Q&A questions when we get to that at the end of the session. You would just raise your Zoom hand, your Zoom virtual hand, and then I can unmute you. It's just a little bit more controlled. So I apologize for that confusion. I forgot to say that. So.
And we have Jamie joining us. Jamie is a school social worker working with students with autism. She also has a nephew with autism and agoraphobia who is 18. Yeah, Jamie, one of the things we'll talk about a little bit today is adult autism and really discuss the differences we see in managing anxiety for children versus adults, because there definitely are some differences in our community. We have Kevin joining us, who's launching an adult autism program. Fantastic. Kevin, thank you so much for doing that. As we often talk about in the autism community, the popular image of autism is around children, but autistic children will grow up to be autistic adults, and we need to be ready for them. Hey, Mary. Mary's joining us. She learned about autism during her undergrad and is now working with students. Thank you for doing what you do, Mary. Oh, another Mary, Mary Beth, is tuning in from Godfrey, Illinois. Her first introduction to autism was in the early 90s. Ironically enough, that was when I originally received my diagnosis of autism in 1992. And she has been teaching social emotional needs students for 31 years. Jock is joining us. Hey, Jock. He is from the Richland Community College Accommodations Office and Director of Academic Success Center. Also has a teenager on the autism spectrum. We'll briefly actually touch base today, Jock, on puberty for those who are on the autism spectrum and how anxiety and challenging behaviors can be associated during puberty. All right. Well, as we're going along, feel free to continue writing in the chat. And if you see someone with a similar story, feel free to chat with them as we're going along. We often say in the autism community is that it takes a village and we need to be there to support one another. So again, for those who might just be joining us just now, my name is Dr. Carrie Magro, a professional speaker. And just to give you a quick glimpse into my journey from non-speaking autism to today being a professional speaker, I wanted to share a quick video with all of you so you can get a little glimpse into my journey before we get started for today's presentation. I hope you enjoy.
April is Autism Awareness and Acceptance Month, and all this week we're taking a closer look at the developmental disorder.
And tonight we introduce you to Carrie Magro. As Teresa Priolo shows us, this best-selling author, speaker, and role model is not letting autism define him.
This question of what happens to children with autism when they become adults with autism is what's happening today.
Jersey City native Carrie Magro has a lot to say, and he is wasting no time letting his thoughts be heard. Something that seemed impossible when Carrie was just a toddler. This cherubic baby, full of innocence and adventure, was enjoying life like any other child his age, except he couldn't verbalize it. Carrie was nonverbal until the age of 2.5.
Some of my earliest memories were like, Mom and Dad, I really wish I could talk for you because I know you're pushing me so hard to try to speak, and I really wish I could do that for you. I wish I could have this conversation with you. I wish I didn't have to point when I had to go to the bathroom or point to when I was hungry. So I think those were my earliest memories, as early as 4.
Today, Carrie is CEO and founder of KFM, Making a Difference, a nonprofit corporation focused on disability advocacy and housing. Once Carrie began talking, well, he didn't stop. He is currently traveling the world sharing his story.
My parents decided to get me focused on rigorous occupational, physical, and speech therapy, which I did for almost 15 years after I was diagnosed.
In May of 2019, Carrie received his doctorate in educational technology leadership from New Jersey City University to become Dr. Carrie Magro. Today, he's showing the world autism is not his disability, but rather it's given him an ability to connect with people far and wide.
I know there's so many people, even to this day, who have unconscious biases around autism and disability and sometimes don't think of these individuals as enough. And what I can tell them as that scared little boy who didn't know what the future had in store for them is my typical thing I like to say is that autism hasn't defined my life. I've defined autism. And I can only hope that every single individual who may be watching this can define their lives and their journeys, regardless if they have autism, every single day for the rest of their lives. It wasn't always easy. But now I can say today that I'm here.
And one more thing, for a guy who has accomplished many of his professional goals before the age of 35, Carrie has just one more big box to check off the list.
I'm a hopeless romantic. I want to fall in love. I want to raise a family.
So that's a little glimpse into my journey. And thank you so much for everyone who's writing in the chat box. Seeing so many parents, educators, therapists, and supporters of this community really just warms my heart. So some housekeeping notes before we get started today. As Kirsten mentioned in the chat box, we will be providing you the PowerPoint slide notes from today's presentation. So typically when I'm attending a conference or a session like this, I'm typically taking a screenshot of every single slide so I don't miss any resource. We'll be sharing about 30 key resources with you today from today's presentation around managing anxiety. So don't worry about that. Just look in the chat box for the PDF, which is available for you. As a thank you for joining us. In addition to that, we'll also include a link Kate says, yay, free stuff. Uh, we will also be providing you a list of free autism resources for you to take advantage of. There will be a bit.ly link at the end of today's presentation, in addition to a QR code. As Kirsten mentioned, we'll have time at the end for question and answer. As we're going along, feel free to write your questions in the Q&A box on the bottom of your screen. We will also have the opportunity for you to raise your hand at the end of today's presentation, so you could ask any question using your mic as well. So my specific challenges. So I was diagnosed at a time when there were about 1 in every 1,000 individuals being diagnosed with autism in the United States. Today, as we know, autism is one of the fastest growing developmental disabilities in our country, impacting 1 in 36 in the United States. We are seeing the fact that autism is 4 times more prevalent in boys than girls. So we still have a lot of stigmas and misconceptions around girl autism that we need to debunk. But we also need to debunk misconceptions around autism and anxiety. You would be shocked to know how many people associate autism as a mental health condition. While many individuals in the autism community may have associated mental health conditions due to their autism diagnosis, it's important to understand that there's no one size fits all when it comes to the autism community. My challenges, though, with anxiety go back to when I was just trying to get that initial diagnosis, which took about 18 months to get diagnosed when I was 4 years old. Anxiety from things like sensory challenges and the fear of unexpected transitional periods when I was going about the process of receiving the diagnosis. Also, in addition to that, the hypersensitivity of those sensory challenges leading to anxiety. And I'll share some coping tips that helped me not only as a child, but also as an adult. So many people, even to this day, come up to me and they say, Carrie, how were you able to cure yourself of your autism diagnosis? I still deal with anxiety and sensory related challenges to this day, which I'll talk a little bit about later in today's presentation. But once I started talking, you couldn't give me a stop, as the Fox 5 video mentioned at the beginning. One of my biggest challenges after I learned how to speak and was really able to flourish in my communication was sensory processing. I was always in a big city. I'm currently in Hoboken, New Jersey. I grew up in Jersey City, New Jersey, which was a huge city where there was always a lot of hypersensitive sounds, sirens, bells. I couldn't go out in wind, rain, or snow. For the parents who are joining us today, just realize that you may be eligible for your child to get a handicap sticker, which was really pivotal for me growing up due to the fact that I had challenges in public places, especially when it came to the feel of things like wind, rain, or snow on my skin. I also couldn't be bathed until 18 months due to the textural feel of water on my skin. I didn't want to be touched or hugged. And one of the big misconceptions we have in the autism community today is that autistic people lack empathy. While I know today that some people who are autistic are some of the most empathetic people I've ever met in my entire life. We have this saying in the community, which I'm sure many of you have heard about right now, but my dear friend, Dr. Stephen Shore says, if you met one autistic person, you met just that one autistic person. We need to highlight the fact that it is a spectrum. I was also a big picky eater. I would literally ask my parents for breakfast, lunch, and dinner until I was about 8 years old for a bologna sandwich due to the consistency of that food in my mouth. I was able to work with reward systems to help me with a lot of those sensations. But thankfully, due to 15 years of occupational, physical, speech, music, and theater therapy until I was graduating from high school at 19 years old, I was able to overcome many of my associated sensory processing challenges with the fact that I had a strong in-house occupational therapist in addition to the occupational support I was receiving in my school systems. And that helped me lead to the career that I have today. I often tell people I took my 2 extreme key interests growing up and turned that into a career. My dear friend, Dr. Temple Grandin, who is a phenomenal autism advocate, says that interests and talents can turn into careers. My 2 key interests growing up were becoming the next Kobe Bryant and also the sixth member of the Backstreet Boys. So I took my love of basketball to gain a degree in sport management at Seton Hall University before deciding to change career paths, realizing the fact that there were a lot of people in the disability community who were being underserved, and me wanting to be a champion to support those who didn't have a voice to speak up for themselves. That led my second career, wanting to be the sixth member of the Backstreet Boys. I fell in love with theater as a way of helping me with a lot of my social and communication challenges, which led me to gain a master's in strategic communications so I could become one of the first openly autistic professionally certified speakers in the United States. It's given me the wonderful opportunity to travel the globe for the past 13 years, speak at over 1,300 events. We're heading to Paris later today to speak to educators about international autism and then also universal design for learning and what that looks like from an international perspective. We've got an opportunity to travel the globe and to continue to talk about celebrating differences in our community. Get an opportunity to write 5 best-selling books during that time in Defining Autism from the Heart, which was a book focused on self-advocacy, autism and falling in love, based on 90 to 95% of the time, the kids I work with, they don't want to talk about job interviews. They don't want to talk about resume building. They want to talk about the cute boy and cute girl and how to go about getting into a relationship for the first time. Similar to managing anxiety, relationships and the topics around resources for those with autism and dating often fall through the cracks in our communities. So I wrote a book in the hopes of helping those individuals. Later on, writing a children's book, we often say that early intervention is the key. But it's also important for those who don't have a personal connection to get that opportunity to understand our autism community. So writing a children's book called I Will Light Up Blue, focused on twins on the autism spectrum who learn about an initiative that changes their lives forever. A few years later, writing a book, Autistics on Autism, gained the opportunity to highlight 100 autistic adult stories on what helped them navigate adolescence into going into adulthood. And then my most recent book, which came out on World Autism Awareness Day on April 2nd, Supporting Your Autism Journey, where we actually wrote a chapter specifically focused on managing anxiety because of we took 60 of the most frequently asked questions that I received from parents, educators, and therapists, and created a guide for people in our community to learn a little bit more about autism. I took my love of theater I haven't had the opportunity to work with any Academy Award winning films yet, but I've got an opportunity to work as a entertainment consultant to bring a realistic portrayal of disability to our entertainment industry, gain the opportunity to work with Warner Brothers on films like Joyful Noise, gain opportunity to work with HBO on shows like Mrs. Fletcher, and then also most recently gained the opportunity to work on Netflix Emmy Award-winning series Love on the Spectrum, which I was so thrilled to say that in the first season, we won 3 Primetime Emmy Awards. The second season, which came out on January 18th of this year, we were in the top 10 shows on Netflix for 3 consecutive weeks. And last month in May, we were renewed for a 3rd season, which we just started production. So hopefully we'll see that happen the next season in 2025. But for those who might just be new to this show, I would love to share a quick clip with all of you so you can get a little sense into what some individuals in our autism community are doing today.
What do you think love is?
Love is a dagger, a pretty thing that enchants, but also hurts.
Welcome back.
Yes, I am back.
What do you think? Should we get started?
Let's get started.
Oh, Kikian,
Yeah.
how's this smile?
That's pretty good. Why do you want to find love?
I have so much love to give. When there's love, there is a right match. Feels like the slipper fits.
I really would like to have someone special with whom I can share the best moments of my life.
Finding love can be hard for anyone.
It's finally my turn, my turn.
To second chances at finding love.
And for some people, it can feel like an impossible dream.
My heart still goes with him.
Just look for that fish in your pond.
Oh, yes.
This series follows people on the autism spectrum.
Quite a grip you got.
So magnanimous, marvelous.
As they navigate the confusing world of relationships.
This is very interesting.
And dating.
Are you a little nervous?
He says yes. I'm going on the date.
So one of the reasons why I also bring that up in today's presentation is that in both seasons, we also had to work with cast members on helping them manage their anxiety. For many of them, this was their first ever opportunity to ever go on a date. And as regardless if you're autistic or not, going on those first dates can be very nerve-wracking and lead to a lot of anxiety. In my role as an autism consultant, I got the opportunity to give trainings to the crew on how to best assist autistic people on set to make sure that they are comfortable going on some of their first dates from my first-person perspective of not only being in relationships before, but successfully maintaining them. As somebody who's 36 now, who started dating when I was about 18 years old. In addition to that, getting the opportunity to work on films that will be coming out later this year, which ironically enough, have themes around managing anxiety, such as Ezra, which actually came out on May 31st nationwide in theaters, which focuses on a dad who goes on a cross-country trip with his autistic son to be on Jimmy Kimmel as he is a stand-up comedian. And what's the great thing about this film, and I'll share a quick clip with you guys on the next slide, but it also talks about managing anxiety for parents. Now, we could talk as much as we like about helping manage anxiety for autistic children and adults. But one of the best ways that we could help them during this process is making sure that we are also focusing on self-care for ourselves as well. So when we are put in the fishbowl, and our autistic children and adults often perceive things way more than we give them credit for, being able to put our best foot forward can be the best way of helping others be able to manage their anxiety as well. In addition to a movie called The Present, which will be on video on demand on June 18th, which focuses on parents who are about to go through a divorce, where one of the autistic children communicates via an augmented alternative communication device. One of the interesting things about this film is that when we talk about managing anxiety, there is often challenges with transitions and routine changes. And divorce can be a huge, huge factor that can lead to anxiety, and how we go about looking at how to help individuals with autism navigate through that process, whether it's providing social stories, visual schedules, et cetera, and so forth. So definitely would recommend checking these out. But for those who might be new to Ezra, we've got an opportunity to receive a credit in this upcoming film, which ironically enough, Robert De Niro's son, who's on the autism spectrum, is one of the people who stars in this film, along with an autistic actor in a nationwide search that we did, highlighting over 100 autistic actors to play this autistic character. And here's a quick clip of the current film.
My man Ezra, flying without a net so that he could order himself a...
Ice tea, please.
The doctor who first told me my son was autistic could have saved us both a lot of time if he just said the truth. Autistic kids don't give a... You want me to put him in a special needs school? Jenna knows I'm broke.
She knows you're still not over her. A man your age shouldn't be living with his father.
He led 20 kids onto Washington Street.
Your son has been a danger to himself.
He's not dangerous. He's a challenge. Nobody wants to do the work.
Now I see where the dangerous behavior comes from.
Son of a...
You want to do something for your son? You get yourself to L.A. Jimmy Kimmel wants to book you.
What?
They're not going to fly you. Is that going to be a problem?
No.
Hey, what are you doing?
Ezra, get in the car. I need to get him away from here.
I'm taking the car. I'm making him a side pop.
All I ever wanted was just to protect our boy.
Well, I'm protecting him now.
Give your Uncle Nicky a hug, huh? Come here.
Hey, where you going, kid?
You know, the word autism comes from the Greek, in your own world. I don't want him in his own world. I want him in this world. That kid is the one thing that I can't get wrong.
Just look him in the eye. Looking a horse in the eye is like sharing your soul.
Where the hell are you?
Taking a little time off with Ez.
It's not a good time to take off, Max.
You're fighting for something. You might have to suffer consequences, but it's worth it because you did it. Because you love your kid.
A dad's job is to take his son down the field. And if he gets tackled, all that dad wants is for that kid to pick up the ball and to take it the rest of the way.
So I absolutely love this film from the perspective that we need to talk more about self-care for our parents, especially when it comes to anxiety. From the clip you just saw, navigating schooling, navigating other areas of topics that are impacting our autism community as well. Rachel writes, any other parents already ugly crying just from the trailer. Yeah, Rachel, it made me tear up the first time I saw it as well. During that time, we also got the opportunity to start a nonprofit where we also help autistic students navigate not only managing anxiety, but also the transition to adulthood, giving out 150 scholarships in the past 9 years for autistic students to pursue a post-secondary education, in addition to giving out 25 small business grants to support helping individuals with disabilities in our community. We realized during COVID-19, anxiety was also a huge, huge issue in our community. Not only the fact that a lot of individuals in our community were having struggles with social skills that they de-learned from being working with Google Classrooms and being home for so long, excuse me, but also understanding the anxiety that it led for people with those routine changes as well. So the talks I get the opportunity today, I get the wonderful opportunity to work with incredible groups like this, but also get an opportunity to do student assemblies, professional development for not only teachers, but also companies, talking around diversity, equity, and inclusion, and what that looks like today in our community. In addition to that, we also get the opportunity to give first responder trainings with the hopes that we need to have larger conversations in our autism community about elopement and wandering because of the fact that around 50% of autistic children in the United States wander from a safe environment and unfortunately go missing as a result. And first responders, such as police officers, can play a really pivotal role in making sure that these individuals are interacted with best when they potentially are met from an officer. So when we talk about mental health, we need to also look at the whole anxiety perspective of this. May is Mental Health Awareness Month. And what my parents did early on was rule out as many associated medical and mental health conditions as humanly possible. As I mentioned earlier in the presentation, a dual diagnosis can be very common for those who are on the autism spectrum. I didn't find out about my dual diagnosis of dysgraphia, which is a hand-brain disorder, until I was 18 years old. So the importance of understanding, ruling out as many, when you see something, speak up. Do not say things like, oh, my child is a late bloomer, they'll grow out of it. And make sure for the educators who are here that you go in with a village when you see those signs, talking to the parents, strengthening that parent-teacher collaboration process, having a village of people there to support what you are seeing in that child. In addition to that, diagnoses that I see often are anxiety, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, also known as ADHD, depression, epilepsy, apraxia, ecophilia, and so much more. What helped me also was a scheduled routine. My key interests were always at the forefront of my parents' conversations. It often feels like in our schools, we focus 99.9% of the time on what our kids' challenges are. But what are we going to do to strengthen our individuals and nurture their strengths? It feels like we need to focus, and that's why I love the aspects of universal design for learning and getting the opportunity to ask the students that we're working with how they learn best and what are some of their hobbies and key interests so we can help them nurture their interests into potential careers. In addition to that, sensory toys were always a huge thing for me. I often tell educators that we need to encourage stimming as long as it's not um, it's as long as it's not harming that individual or others in their community. I often hear a huge debate from BCBAs in our community about we need to decourage stimming. But for me, and for people who are new to the concept of stimming, stimming can be as simple as rubbing your hands together when you feel overwhelmed. And it's something that we all do. Every single one of us who have joined this webinar today do this thing called stimming. And for me, it was a great way of helping me self-regulate. I would work with an occupational therapist on ways of making sure that when I had the anxiety, I could go to a place where I felt most comfortable. And that was rubbing my hands together. Later on, going to websites like funandfunction.com and getting sensory brushes, which could help me come back to a place of normalcy. I always did deep breathing. I did exercises in using that sensory brush for like 5 to 10 minutes at a time to help me with my associated anxiety challenges because of my autism diagnosis and my sensory challenges. Like I mentioned earlier, I also had the in-house occupational therapist come in on weekends. Music therapy, though, was something that was pivotal because there was always something annoying about loud noises, but there was always something soothing about music. We need to find ways in our schools to integrate more music therapy to help these individuals because it not only helps with communication, but it also can help with managing anxiety. I think today, one of the best ways that I manage anxiety is literally going on my iTunes and just playing music. That completely changes my mindset and what my challenges are today. Also, when we talk about this, and I mentioned this earlier, but the idea that autism is not a mental health condition, while some people have associated mental health conditions due to their autism diagnosis, excuse me again. When we look at this, autism affects brain development, and it's evident from early on. But when we talk about mental health disorders, they typically develop later in life. So while we see that you could diagnose autism as early as 18 months, mental health disorders are typically associated with either a traumatic situation that happens to a child over time or their associated diagnoses, which may lead to mental health challenges over time. When we also look at that, it's also important to realize the differences between distinct characteristics. Autism traits may become less over time, but nobody grows out of having an autism diagnosis, while mental health conditions can have varying symptoms over time that vary in nature. Some of them can be very mild, where you see people who have invisible disabilities where you may not even know they have any anxiety-related challenges. And then there might be ones that are more heightened, which you might see them from a physical perspective in their day-to-day lives. Some things that you should definitely consider are making sure to talk to your loved one's primary physician or a school psychologist to do a consultation for that child in the school systems to help understand a little bit more about the anxiety that they may be going through. I also definitely recommend Autism Speaks has over 43 toolkits for you to take advantage of, from everything from early intervention to later adulthood and receiving an autism diagnosis in adulthood. And one of my favorite toolkits that they have available for you to check out is the ATN-AIRP Medication Decision Aid Kit. When we talk about a lot of anxiety, again, I'm not a doctor, and nothing that I say today can be perceived as medical advice. However, what this toolkit actually does is give a great breakdown of the options of using medicine to help with certain behaviors. When we talk about this, we're not trying to take away somebody's autism or take away anything related to that. We're really focused on helping them with the certain challenging behaviors or those mental behaviors that might be leading to challenges. Also reaching out for second opinions to avoid misdiagnoses in our community. Now, we see this often in girls in our community, which is leading to less girls being diagnosed because girls are more likely to mask different characteristics they have. So when we talk about this, it's really, really important to have conversations around obsessive compulsive disorder, general anxiety, and make sure that we are doing our utmost when we're talking about assessments, whether it's the MCHAT model or another autism assessment model, to make sure that we are understanding those associated conditions and those signs that a child or adult may have. Also understanding that autism and anxiety are two separate things, again, really need to be at the forefront of our conversations around managing anxiety. Uh, the other thing is we need to have larger conversations about those resources that are currently available out there. I often hear from parents that they don't see anything online, but I have worked with a great organization called Spark for Autism, where they have created a list of autism and managing anxiety resources for you to take advantage of in regards to publications. The first one is the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatrists. They actually have a resource database of all 51 states and how you might be able to find mental health providers in your area to help your student or your child. In addition to that, the American Psychiatric Association also has an adult psychiatrist finder. As we're learning more in our community, we now realize that over 2.3 million individuals in the United States are autistic adults. And for many of these individuals, they knew about their diagnoses when they were kids, but it did not lead to a diagnosis, which is why we're seeing the CDC actually come out with more adult autism numbers than typically what you see with the Center for Disease Control is that they diagnose the 8-year-old children and come out with a biannual report that looks at that. But we're also seeing that they are putting in more resources to discuss adult autism and those diagnoses as well. The American Psychological Association also has a psychologist finder as well. And then there's a great paper on pediatrics journal, which discusses advice for primary care providers. They also have a 2-part series on anxiety and autism that I would definitely recommend watching if you want to learn a little bit more about these topics around managing anxiety, because they break down the different disorders and diagnoses that are often associated with anxiety, such as social anxiety disorder, generalized anxiety disorder, panic disorders, and also phobias and separation anxiety as well, and what that specifically looks like in our community today. There are some great treatment ideas. Again, none of this should be considered medical advice. However, you should always have those conversations with if your teacher, school psychologist, or specifically with that parent talking to their physician. But we're now seeing that medical cannabis is becoming more approved as part of insurance plans for individuals with autism in our communities. Ironically enough, Connecticut just approved this week to provide medical cannabis as a potential avenue for autistic individuals in terms of helping them with many of their behaviors due to their autism diagnosis. I also am a huge advocate for Tide Lavender. Those little Tide Pods that have the scent of lavender can have soothing effects and calming effects for individuals who are on the autism spectrum. Also, cognitive behavioral therapy. There's no one size fits all when it comes to our autism community, but one therapy that I've been seeing help a lot of families in our community is cognitive behavioral therapy. In a nutshell, it takes negative behaviors and it trains an individual's mind to come to a positive outlook over time. Mindfulness treatment is also a great idea. The sensory brushes that I discussed a little bit, and then also reward systems and token systems. These can be great ways of helping individuals not only with self-motivation towards succeeding academically and reaching developmental milestones, but also later down the line, being able to find that self-motivation in themselves to be able to support themselves as they go into adulthood, especially for those with less support needs. Other areas that may help with anxiety include, but are not limited to, visual schedules, social stories. We continue to see that autistic people thrive when it comes to routine. So when you have that structure in place, they are more likely to be able to follow through with their daily activities that they have in their lives and other areas as well. We also need to potentially look into deep pressure. Dr. Temple Grandin, who's phenomenal, get the opportunity to work with her at several different speaking engagements each year. Came out with a movie based on her life on HBO, starring Claire Danes in 2011, where she talks about a weighted machine that she used to help soothe her when she didn't like to be touched by humans. She never liked that physical touch. So she had a squeeze machine as a way of helping her, which actually led to reduced anxiety over time. These today are so pivotal when we're talking about things like weighted blankets or weighted vests for some individuals in our community. And then also looking at the significant impact animals can have on reducing anxiety over time as well. Understanding the idea around service animals are specifically beneficial towards those who have a diagnosis of autism and can be potentially eligible for many individuals in most states in the US. When we also talk about this, it's really important to have larger conversations about mindfulness and relaxation techniques. In college, I think one of the best courses I ever took was a Zen and yoga class where I was able to really focus on my own self-awareness, on what some of my challenges were, especially when it was focused on anxiety. A transition to adulthood can be rough for anyone, especially for somebody like myself. I didn't have a transition IEP. So when I was going into college, I had to learn how to self-advocate for myself for the very first time. That got really, really challenging, especially early on. But being able to get involved with mindfulness techniques like Zen and yoga was really, really helpful. And it might seem obvious to some, but they can be really beneficial for the autism community. Things like progressive muscle relaxation, starting from, for example, closing your eyes and then literally feeling the way that your body moves, starting with your feet, going all the way to your head, and doing that for 5 to 10 minutes at a time, while being able to understand that screen fatigue is something that can lead to anxiety for some autistic adults in our community today, along with autistic children. Being able to close your eyes for 5 to 10 minutes and being able to think about your body can be really helpful. Guided imagery as well. For example, I often use guided imagery to visualize a peaceful place like a quiet beach or a serene forest. Now, for some individuals, that's as simple as me on my iPhone being able to change the background on my main screen to a beach in Miami. I'm obsessed with Miami, and that's where I typically try to go anytime I get a few weeks off from professional speaking, as a way of helping me continue that guided imagery in my head to keep that in my space all year round, even when I'm not in beautiful Miami on the beaches. I close my eyes and I imagine every detail from the sound of the waves, even to the smell of the trees. This helps shift my focus from stress to relaxation. Mindful walking, it's also really, really beneficial. We understand that 30 minutes of walking a day not only have benefits in terms of short-term and long-term retention for autistic individuals, but it also relieves positive endorphins to help individuals look at the world via a positive outlook, which can be really also beneficial for those who have challenging behaviors in the autism community. Meditation apps, there's some great ones that you can check out right away if you have a smartphone, via apps like Calm and Headspace, which often offer guided meditations specifically designed to reduce anxiety. And they can be really beneficial. Many of them have free options. And then also, if you like them, they have paid options as well. So you can retain different classes and activities over time. And if that doesn't work, again, taking a yoga class and really gain the opportunity to help your autistic loved one with deep breathing exercises can be really, really beneficial. We talked that last slide a little bit about self-awareness, and it's really, really important that when we talk about helping manage anxiety, that we make sure that people are comfortable in their own skin. I often get educators who tell me not to call myself an autistic person and always to put the person before the disability. So call myself a person with autism. And I find that so disheartening because I actually learned when I was 11 and a half years old about my autism diagnosis. We were playing disability celebrity bingo in a social skills class where you're learning that individuals like Michael Jordan has ADD, Magic Johnson has ADHD. And then at the end of the class, I raised my hand and I said, so teacher, you said all these individuals are special. So why am I special? And she said I had to talk to my parents about that. So I sat my parents down right after school that day. And that was the first time they ever told me I had autism. And it was life changing. And years later, being able to kind of find my own awareness of who I was as an individual, the strengths and challenges that autism had given me in my life made the world a less scary place to live in. And it helped me so much with my anxiety. When we have earlier conversations, we can lead to conversations about helping these individuals. It also just helped me from the perspective of understanding that there was a world outside of my own kind of mind blindness I had. I always saw my own perspective, but I didn't see the perspectives of others. So being able to understand my diagnosis and understand that I was different than some of the other kids in my class really helped me understand the differences that were in our community. It's also important when we're talking about managing anxiety to never hide that child is on the autism spectrum, because this can lead to heightened anxiety over time. Because for so long, I knew I was special, but I didn't know what that meant. That led to times of anxiety in my childhood. There's some great educational tools where you could help a student learn a little bit more about their autism diagnosis. In the previous slide, we mentioned PBS Kids have some great programming around Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood, which focuses on a character in his play group having autism. Hero Elementary has a superhero who's on the autism spectrum. And then also there are some more adult related topics around autism, such as Atypical, which focuses on Sam Gardner, an 18-year-old who has autism, who is pursuing post-secondary. Also in this show, he is definitely dealing with managing anxiety during certain segments, which is available to check out on Netflix. And then also an Amazon original on Amazon Prime called As We See It, which focuses on 3 autistic adults trying to navigate their adulthood, living independently with the help of an aide. So when we talk about resources as well, I would also definitely, again, recommend a visual aid as a way of helping individuals. One thing that I would love to see more in our community is conversations around, for example, natural disaster because I see that sometimes when it comes to anxiety, often for individuals I work with, it's those unexpected things that happen in our communities. And Sesame Street actually created a list of natural disaster resources and how we can educate people with autism via a campaign that they called the See Amazing campaign. Now, this is the same campaign that did the first Muppet ever to come to Sesame Street in Julia, who's a 4-year-old autistic girl. And here's a quick clip of some of those resources that you might be able to take advantage of.
Here for each other, big changes, brought to you by PSEG. There, Big Bird. When there's an emergency, it can cause some big changes, and that can be hard on kids and birds.
Yeah, like right now, I can't be in my nest because of a big storm.
And since I'm not home, I can't do the things I'm used to doing. But you are safe here with me, Big Bird.
I know, Granny Bird.
And even though you're someplace different, we can still do lots of things you enjoy.
Like what?
Well, we can play.
But I don't have my toys.
That's all right. We can play imagination games.
Huh?
Or we can tell stories.
But I don't have my books.
Well, we can make stories up.
Oh.
And we can sing songs. And draw pictures.
Oh, I love doing all those things.
And of course, you can always cuddle with your favorite bear.
Radar. Oh, Radar feels better already.
Oh, good.
Ah.
And as they say, birds of a feather hug together. Even though you might be in different places, you can still do a lot of things together.
So this is just a great idea because it really just helps from, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic. I saw anxiety being talked about a lot in our communities. We actually even wrote a book called Life After Lockdown, which focuses, my chapter in that book focuses on helping individuals manage anxiety when there are unexpected changes happening in their community. And that's a really great resource for individuals in our community, because I know so many even autistic adults who really, really love SpongeBob, Sesame Street, and love things that, we often talk about age appropriateness. And I think if somebody enjoyed something, we should just let them enjoy it. Apps that I mentioned earlier, including Common Headspace, are really great. But also when we were talking about managing anxiety, I really believe that time management can also play a pivotal role towards autistic individuals really being able to thrive via apps like Muse, which is also a meditation app, in addition to Clear, which keeps track of current assignments, and then also Wonderlust, which helps create a list of tasks which can be shared with family members over time. It's also important to understand the differences of anxiety and what they may look like based on the spectrum of autism. When I was diagnosed, we had 5 different types of autism, and now today autism, as part of the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, is an umbrella diagnosis, which focuses on level 1 autism, level 2 autism, and level 3 autism. Now, when we talk about level 1 autism, we might be able to rope in more mindfulness techniques like we just talked about, really focused on some coping mechanisms that can help anyone, regardless if they have an autism diagnosis or not. When we talk about level 2 autism, we might have individuals who are requiring more substantial support, who more on the lines of occupational therapy, other interventions that may help manage anxiety as well. This is during the realms that you may be looking more in the sense of medications, medical cannabis, as well as potential avenues of supporting these individuals. And then level 3 autism requiring very substantial support, really on the process of needing more supervision. This is when you might have more guidance from psychologists involved in helping create a person-centered plan around managing anxiety for those individuals. We also need to look at helping when we're talking about the environment as well, when we're talking about helping manage anxiety. Often I see that the world is sometimes not a place that. So I just backtracking really quick. So there was a story of a parent that I was working with who said to me that we can't be afraid of having our children out there in the world, because they would never learn and the world would never learn about our children. And I found that really, really interesting, because I often find that, especially in public places, they are really limited in terms of helping our autism community, especially when it comes to things like sensory challenges. That is why I love groups like IBCCES, Culture City, who are training travel destinations to be more sensory friendly, realizing that's not only people with autism who deal with these challenges, but it can be a lot of different individuals. So managing anxiety, thinking in terms of environment can be really, really helpful. And we talk about that doing things like creating quiet areas, encouraging more of our local legislators to consider more unified playgrounds in our public places. And when we talk about this, also utilizing resources, there's a great website called paautism.org, which actually has a one-sheet PDF where you can learn a little bit more about how you can create a sensory-friendly location in your area. Predictable schedules as well. Again, routine is really, really important. Maintaining constant schedules to reduce uncertainty. Visual aids, again, using visual aids and social stories to prepare for transitions. Positive reinforcement. Now, a lot of people, when I talk to about this concept of positive reinforcement, always think it has to be a reward focused on a material possession. We need to really reinforce social reinforcement, saying things like "good job" after a autistic child does a desired behavior or a desired outcome can be really beneficial to their psyche and also helping with managing anxiety. Also looking at safe zones as well when we don't have the opportunity to do any of the things listed above, where individuals can just feel safe, whether that is a area where there are sensory toys or some common interests that might be beneficial to them. Also understand the importance of social skills to help manage anxiety. When we talk about K through 12, this is often one of the most overlooked areas that I think our schools need to have larger conversations about. We need to have the opportunity to also understand that being able to look at goals that are either observable or measurable and talking about that with our students from earlier ages can help them in the hopes of helping them navigate their transition to adulthood one day, especially for those who have less support needs. For example, a measurable goal could be I will greet my peers at least twice a week during group activities. Or instead of writing notes, I will ask my teacher for help when I don't understand a situation at least once a week. I created a webinar class focused on things like social skills, picky eating, all available on my website if you want to learn a little bit more about these topics and go into a deep dive in any of those conversations. Also understanding the difference between anxiety in children versus adults is really, really pivotal as well. We have to understand that when we're talking about developmental stages, that some people with autism, especially when it comes to independence, are going to have a different outlook on what anxiety looks like for them compared to children. When we talk about this, anxiety manifests differently due to varying developmental stages. Children may struggle with separation anxiety and school-related stress, whereas adults might face employment, social relationship pressures, living independently, housing, and also potential guardianship as well. Expression of anxiety. Children might also display anxiety through tantrums and refusal to attend school or physical symptoms like stomach aches. It's also important that we have more focus on the differences between tantrums and meltdowns, because when I was growing up, every educator, it felt like, just assumed that my meltdown was a tantrum and always tried to stop me from doing that situation, which led to a lot of anxiety. We have to understand our community, the differences for that, because a meltdown, typically you just have to let it steer its course because it will ultimately end over time because an individual will be worn out in that specific situation. Also, looking at it when it comes to adults, it may be more internalized symptoms where you see excessive worry, insomnia, or avoidance of social situations, where you might see more masking, where somebody like myself, when I was being bullied growing up, I would stop my stimming by putting my hands down to my sides as a way of making sure that I wouldn't be bullied. And that led to not only burnout, but also excessive worry as well, especially when I was in high school as I was transitioning to adulthood. When we talk about triggers as well, it's also important to have journals. If it isn't written down, it didn't happen. Obviously, it's educators, we know that, but it's also important to have a journal for our students to make sure that we're understanding common triggers that may lead to high-end anxiety for them to help them manage that. And then when it comes to adults, triggers also looking at being able to provide more peer mentors for our adults to help them have larger conversations about things like work stress, financial responsibilities, and also complex social interactions as well. Communication barriers also, again, there's a huge difference between our children and adults, simply because children are still, whether they're neurotypical or not, they are learning how to communicate for themselves for the first time versus adults who might have more ability to communicate. And then also coping mechanisms. Children may often rely heavily on parental or teacher support to manage anxiety. Again, these are when these reward systems may need to be in place, where adults may develop more independent coping mechanisms, having those positive peer role models in our community. It's not necessarily going to be the Michael Jordans of the world, but the Temple Grandins, the Dan Aykroyds, these individuals who are on the autism spectrum who are doing some great things, being able to have that mindset available for those individuals to have motivation in their own right that they could potentially do great things one day as well. When we talk about adults, there's some great programs currently available out there today to learn a little bit more about managing anxiety in adults, such as UCLA has a peers program, which has been really, really helpful to help understand the importance of peer mentoring. I was at a program, I was giving a staff development in Las Vegas to over 350 educators. And I asked them, how many of you have a strong peer mentoring program in your school? And only 3 out of the 350 raised their hands. And I found that so unfortunate because peer mentoring typically doesn't affect the bottom line in our schools. It just takes an academic advisor 15 to 20 hours annually to come up with a structure of who are the students who are in most need of support from a peer. So it's also important to look at things like having open and honest conversations about things such as drugs and alcohol that an individual may be using to help with their anxiety related challenges as well, in addition to having larger conversations about masking as well. We talked a little bit about this already, but the other ideas around exercise are really, really important. Our schools need to make sure that they're doing their utmost when it comes to providing physical education, and in our colleges providing electives that are focused on physical activity to help individuals just release tension. Also looking at things such as nature as ways of helping individuals, and realizing that things like seasonal depression can have a really hard challenge on anxiety. So being able to provide light therapy can be really, really beneficial, especially during those colder winter months, while also during the summer months, being able to have activities outside to help individuals be in the fresh air can be really beneficial. During my time during COVID and dealing with a lot of anxiety challenges, I was really blessed to have the opportunity to contribute to a book with a world-renowned autism expert in Dr. Tony Atwood, who has a great perspective on managing anxiety. He calls it an Aspie's Guide to Life on Earth. And it's a really powerful perspective that I wanted to share with all of you.
Okay, there must be some constructive strategies. What can we do? In the book, what amazed me were 2 things in particular. Physical activity. Often those with Asperger's say, my main interests are sedentary, looking at a screen, and that lethargy, unfortunately, is not a good idea. So one of the best ways is physical activity, as one person said, running keeps anxiety away. So please, get a personal trainer. Find someone who can help you with your personality and body type so that you can develop regular physical activity. Is one of the best treatments. It's better than Prozac and it's better than psychotherapy. Now, within the book, diet amazed me because it was so consistent in the responses that a diet free of junk food and using nutritional food seemed to improve mood no end. And whether this is linked to the toxic effects of junk food or something to do with Asperger's and metabolism, I don't know. Another strategy that I would recommend is relaxation and the possibility of meditation. Psychologists are becoming more aware of mindfulness, yoga, a whole range of strategies. There are actually books on this now that are written by people with Asperger's syndrome who have said this has significantly improved my quality of life and reduced my anxiety. So I do recommend you seriously have a look at meditation. Now, another strategy works, but just be cautious about it, and that's the special interest as a thought blocker. When you're anxious, you get intrusive thoughts and worries about things, and one way of keeping those at bay is to become so engrossed in the special interest you can't feel anxious, and the interest is an energizer, and it's also a source of pleasure. Now, it works, but as with many things that work, use it in moderation, not as your primary way of alleviating anxiety. Now, another strategy is being with animals or a safe person, or especially in nature. Now, that may be a beach, it may be woodland, it may be a park in the city. But there is something soothing and relaxing about being in nature, and those with Asperger's seem to be very in tune with that. But also what seems to have occurred in the book, that is maturity. The older and more mature people with Asperger's have said, I tolerate it, I accept it, but I don't let it control my life. So maturity may mean there's less of an emotional reaction. So Craig and the audience, those are my thoughts on anxiety.
So I love that perspective. And Tony Atwood, similar to myself, travels the country and gets the opportunity to educate more people on celebrating differences. The one thing that I would add, just based on his video, which we need to have larger conversations about when we're talking about adult autism, is also the benefits that potential things like masturbation can have for adults who are on the autism spectrum, and making sure that when we talk about autism and sexuality, understanding the significant benefits towards those types of activities can have in certain situations, especially for our adults, making sure that we're making real priority of having health classes in our high schools and later on in our post-secondary institutions to understand the benefits that they have in our communities. It's also important that we talked about the 3 levels and how it can differ when we're talking about managing anxiety, but we also have to realize the fact that 40% of autistic children in the United States are either non-speaking or non-verbal. And that's why person-centered approaches to helping manage anxiety are really, really important, because of the fact that some individuals might not be able to communicate their specific needs, especially when it comes to those anxiety-related challenges. So you may look at the signs and consult with a psychiatrist or a psychologist on things like body movements. Understanding that for some individuals who are not speaking, they are often kinetic learners. And what we mean by kinetic learners is they learn best by moving, because of the fact that they haven't had the ability to speak up and communicate these needs. They are often having to rely on kinetic focus to learn best. Also understanding rare stimming behavior, sweating, and then also potential self-injury that they have for themselves as well. When we talk about sensory challenges, it's also really important to understand that some individuals who are non-speaking have high pain thresholds where they may have injury to themselves and not be able to express it, which can be leading to anxiety as well. While I often had hypersensitivity due to my sensory challenges, there are some people who have low sensory where they might not have specific feels that are compared to somebody who is quote unquote non-disabled. So finally, guys, I never expected this to be my life. I was told so many times that I would always have challenges, and I just want you to know that no one thing in our students or our child's lives have to define who they are. Go out there every single day and try to help them define their lives and their journeys in the way that they best see it every single day. And if you need any help getting started in those conversations, these are the ways that you can stay in contact with me after today's presentation. I thank you all so much for being an awesome audience, and I would love to answer any questions that you have at this time. As Kirsten mentioned, feel free to raise your hand or to write your question in the Q&A box, and we'll try to get to as many questions as we can at this time. Thank you all so much for joining us. Oh, and as a housekeeping note, to get the free list of autism resources, you could either scan that QR code with your smartphone by going to the camera app on your smartphone and scanning that QR code, or you could go to the link bit.ly/Carrie slide notes, and we'll make sure that you receive that after today's presentation. So we had a few questions come in via the Q&A box already. An anonymous attendee wrote that could we drop the link for the PowerPoint again if it was provided earlier? So yes, so I will make sure to provide the PDF in the chat box because I know a lot of people did their interactive activity. If you do scroll up though, Kirsten already posted it. Perfect. Thank you, Kirsten. So it's currently available for you guys to check out. Another anonymous attendee wrote, can you repeat the sensory location website in the area? Sure. So it's funandfunction.com, and I will provide that link in the chat box for you to take advantage of. I know there was a question that came in via the chat box from Mary Beth. Hey, Mary Beth. And she's asking, are there CPUs available for this webinar? Now, Kirsten, actually,
so we do not provide CPUs, but we can provide a certificate of participation. If you would like one, please just email me and then I will have my colleague provide you one with your name. I'll put my email in the chat here.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you, Kirsten. Any other thoughts, questions? Feel free to either raise your hand or write them in the Q&A box. And as you guys are thinking about that, I love all the comments coming in. Some people mentioned that they will utilize these resources. I'm really glad to hear that. Also, just as a final housekeeping note before we log off, I consider testimonials the greatest compliment. If you learned something new from my presentation today and you would just like to leave me a few sentences on what you enjoyed best about the presentation, you could also scan that QR code or go to the link right there. I would always love to hear more about you guys and how we can better these presentations for you, because again, it does take a village and we want to support you. That's why we're here. Carrie writes, hey, Carrie, do you think CAPD makes a big difference in treatment of autism? Again, there's no one size fits all, Carrie, so it really depends on the individual in that certain situation. So it's really, really just important to have those conversations with either a school psychologist or a main pediatrician. I can never give medical advice because I am not have a doctorate in education, but I do not have a PhD to provide a real perspective on that for these conversations. Hey, Carrie, thank you so much for that comment. Carrie, if you could scan that QR code, that would be awesome, because I would love just to have that and your permission to use that feedback. Yes, Tammy. Tammy writes, any bonus content? Yes. You'll get a free list of autism resources that are not available from the PDF. So when you scan that QR code, you will receive additional content. Lauren writes, hey, Lauren. Lauren says, when do you think a secondary diagnosis is warranted for anxiety, OCD, versus considering some challenges as a characteristic of the autism diagnosis? Lauren, I always feel like it's important because when we talk about this, especially when it comes to a child's IEP, there are some accommodations that can be beneficial that you may not necessarily be able to get with an autism diagnosis. Now, it's important to realize that when we talk about accommodations at school, we always have to discuss why the accommodation is needed. When I was in school, I just thought I had autism and I would receive all accommodations because I had autism. I had to, my parents and my child study team had to realize why the accommodations were needed. Why were they important to my development? And what we realized is with a lot of anxiety diagnoses, this can lead to mental health accommodations that might not necessarily be available with that specific autism diagnosis. It's always better to roll on the side of caution, regardless, no matter what, to provide potential accommodations that you would not received without that diagnosis. Great question. We have a few more comments coming in. Beatrice writes, I was interested in the 3 levels. Yeah, Beatrice, what we need to understand is that the Diagnostic Statistical Manual comes out with a new guide every few years where we have different characteristics of not only autism, but a wide range of disabilities like ADHD in our community today. So with that, though, there are a lot of people who I know in the community who still consider themselves having Asperger's syndrome, even though it's not a diagnostic criteria anymore. So it's really interesting to educate more people on that topic because I feel like a lot of people still are a little uncertain about those different levels. We have a few more questions coming in. Laura writes, am I able to go back and rewatch the webinar? Yes, Laura. So Kirsten and her wonderful team make all of these webinars available on their website. And I believe I have the link. I'll add it in the chat, but Kirsten, just in case I have a typo, I believe it's Autism College and Career. Let's see. Few more coming in. Hey, Rachel. Rachel writes, do you have any recommended resources on looking for college supports for your child? Yes, Rachel, great question. My book, Autistics on Autism, we did a roundtable of 5 university experts in the field of autism spectrum disorders who also have some form of autism programming from groups like Drexel University at Delphi, where they provide resources on different college supports that are helping autistic children today. You could go to also thinkcollege.net, has some great resources for the autism community. Autismincollege.com was actually created by a mom who has an autistic young adult who's on the autism spectrum as well. You can also look at all the available webinars that Illinois State University have done via these training programs as well. And if I'm not mistaken, I also did one on post-secondary, which is available at autismcollegeandcareer.com. Okay, Kathy, thank you so much for the comment. Kathy writes, thank you. I already ordered a couple of sensory brushes that I can use for the next year with my young students. Kathy, that means the world to me. If you could scan that QR code and just copy and paste that comment so I have permission to share that, that would mean a lot because I feel like sometimes people feel uncomfortable doing that because they're worried that their autistic child will be judged or bullied for having that. But I think it's really, really beneficial. All right. Well, I'm not seeing any other questions, but so thank you all again so much, Kirsten. Thank you so much for your team for having us again. And I hope you all have a great rest of your day and talk soon.
Awesome. Thank you, Carrie. Okay, just a couple of follow-up things. So Carrie's session will be provided, the recording will be provided on autismcollegeandcareer.com, the website that I just put in the chat. You'll receive a follow-up email tomorrow from Zoom that will have a link to that URL for our website where you can find the recording and Carrie's presentation. You will also have a link to a follow-up survey in that follow-up email. And I've also put the follow-up survey link in the chat. I wrote follow-up survey with the hyperlink. If you could please take that follow-up survey, our autism planning committee does, or our ADA planning committee does look at the follow-up survey. There's a question on there about any future professional development topics that you would like to be provided. You can provide follow-up on this session and we can give that back to Carrie. And you can also provide us with feedback just about the project as a whole. So we really do welcome that feedback. I know surveys can be tedious, so I always like to take them right after a PD session. So I went ahead and put the link in the chat for you all. So we do appreciate your participation with that. And thank you so much, everyone. Have a great day. We appreciate you coming on, and we hope that you found this valuable. Thank you again, Carrie.
Thank you, everybody.